We are down to the stretch run of today's program, and sometimes what I do in these segments, because we've been so busy, some topics, some stories are so overwhelming. Take this convention story this week that we don't get to a lot of other things that really I think are important, and I'm going to try to just do a little hopscotching around some of these stories in the last few minutes of the program today. Also, maybe take a telephone call or two if you're inclined to pick up the phone and give me a shout. Telephone number 736-0300. 736-0300, 944. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 71. If you're listening to this program, thank you. If you're having difficulty listening to this program, let me help you. I'd like to refer you to Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology, now the only locally owned independent hearing healthcare practice in southern Idaho. And she'd like to remind you, if you're like most people, you likely believe that hearing is something that really only takes place in your ears, but in fact, it's between the ears that it counts, because that's where all your gray matter is. The brain is where sound becomes the details. Your brain has to work hard to make this happen, and when the sound signals from your ears are compromised, the brain has to work even harder to fill in the gaps. The extra effort can take its toll. Don't let your brain down in these situations. Take care of your hearing with the help of Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. The telephone number is 312-0957. So as I say, I'm going to hopscotch around a couple of stories in the latter segment of the program today, but if I could get to these, I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. First of all, this one comes out of they call it 1 Million Moms. I signed up for emails from this organization called 1 Million Moms a few years ago, and I'm glad I did, because these are mothers around the country who have united. They've banded together because they are trying to look out for their children. And in modern America, you cannot shield your children from everything that you would believe is offensive to them or could hurt them, no matter what you do, especially with mass media being so dominant. Most people now have at least 150 channels on their television sets at home, and the kids have the video games, and the kids get exposed to this. If you don't have it in your house, they get exposed to it at a neighbor's house. They get exposed to it at school. Nickelodeon, which is a channel that my little girl, well, she's grown up now, but when she was a little girl, she used to watch. It has a show called Loud House, and it is now going to feature a married homosexual couple. So your children they keep claiming, well, we were born that way. This is not something that we chose. Well, let me offer a few thoughts on this. We were just talking about evolution a few minutes ago. All right, if you believe in evolution, then homosexuality is an evolutionary dead end and shouldn't exist. And then they said, well, I was born that way, so there must be a gay gene. Then we decoded what's called the human genome, and it turned out there was no gay gene. So, okay, it's not anything, it's evolutionary, and there's no gene for it. And again, even if there was a gene for it, evolution would have screened it out a long time ago if, again, you believe in evolution. So, therefore, those excuses don't work. So then I watched a CBS 60 Minutes report with a liberal Leslie Stahl where they tried to say, well, maybe it's a chemical imbalance in the womb that actually does this. But they don't find any chemicals in the womb that could be triggering it. So it must be something that happens environmentally in your life which leads you down this trail. Now, maybe it's like the birds. If you have an egg and it hatches and the bird sees you first, the bird thinks you're mama. Maybe it's a certain point in your life where you have that first flutter of experience, and it's what you're looking at the time that sends you down that road. But if you have to put on a TV show for little children and show a couple like this, isn't that really trying to recruit people into this lifestyle? Because overall, we keep hearing, well, the liberals like to say it's 10% of the American public, but the liberal Canadians did a survey and found research shows only 2% of Canadians are that way. So that likely means maybe not even 2% of Americans. So the number is really, really small in the first place. But they're loud, and because some of them are loud, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Okay, maybe that's not quite the way I want to describe that. But the fact of the matter is these people are loud, and this is what happens. And they've managed to get their tentacles into media. They did it first in the news business by getting hired as news anchors and producers and reporters on TV. They ended up getting into newspapers, and they're now in important positions of power. And they were able to reshape this over the last 25 years as a civil rights issue. And people said, well, there was no homosexual agenda. Sure there was. They took over the media, the news media, so they could promote it and tell you that you're a mean-spirited, hate-filled bigot if you believe otherwise. And so that job has been done already. Now they are trying to put these characters into children's cartoons so little tiny tots can sit in front of the TV and be recruited. So 1 Million Moms is asking you to call Viacom, which is behind this. And one thing you could do is email them. And there's an email address here, and it's a long name, silly name, and I don't even know that I could explain it over the air. But it's telling people to react to it, and maybe Nickelodeon will make the right choice before this show ever airs. Otherwise, I guess you have to get rid of your television set, because there's always the chance, if you've got cable or dish, that your kid could be exposed to this, because you can't be in that room with them every minute. 10 minutes now, away from 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 70, and you're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. Bill, I was watching Stu Varney this morning, and his frequent guest, Judge Napolitano, said the next nuclear Clinton scandal will be the investigation of the multi-million-dollar Clinton Foundation.
I'm sure it will be. I got a couple of emails on that in the last couple of days from some folks right here in the state of Idaho. Apparently lots of dough coming in there. But look, the media didn't care that she compromised national security. They're still promoting her as being better than Trump. They would prefer someone who might give away more secrets to our enemies in the White House because they don't like Trump. So it doesn't matter. Hillary Clinton is and I think Carson was alluding to it last night. Hillary Clinton could be taking her advice, her campaign advice, and her governing advice literally from the devil. It doesn't matter to the liberals. It doesn't matter to them whatsoever. Because, well, look, I'm going to get my free stuff. Coming up on 9 minutes now from 10 o'clock. Got more details here that you should know about just various issues around the country that we haven't gotten to so far this week. Daily Signal has this story, Second Amendment issue. Gun seller says his bank is demanding ridiculous information. A firearms dealer in North Carolina said his bank asked him to reveal ridiculous and somewhat illegal details about his business and his customers after the June 12 terrorist attack in Orlando, Florida. And he believes a secretive Justice Department program is to blame. It's called Operation Choke Point. So now the bank, which he deals with on a daily basis, you got to deposit your receipts somewhere every day. His bank is demanding to know the details of his customers. Who's coming into your store? Well, I don't like his name. No, he's a Republican, you say. Oh, I heard one time he used the name for God of Yahweh. Oh, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to do business with you any longer. 952, telephone number to reach our show, 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Another caller joins us, and you're on the air.
Yeah, forgive me, Bill. I'm calling back today, but it was just so apropos. This article I read in the Times News, and it was from the Washington Post, and it said both are unpopular. Only one is a threat. And guess who the threat was?
Yeah.
It wasn't Hillary. I mean, if she isn't a threat to our national security, I don't know what is. But that's my comment.
She can't get a security clearance, thank you. Or she couldn't in a normal world. She shouldn't. And yet, who's writing that at the Washington Post? Well, the man who's really in charge of most of the editorials is a fellow by the name of Jonathan Capehart. He's sometimes on TV. You might notice him by the affectation in his voice, which we're told that those people don't actually have, that's just a stereotype. And then you see Capehart on TV. Number one, flaming liberal, a proponent of Black Lives Matter and black nationalism. And by the way, we were talking about people of a certain sexual persuasion a few minutes ago. He's one of those too. He used to sit there on Morning Joe some years ago and talk about how his boyfriend Giuseppe was in love with Barack Obama. It's like, well, then why are you going out with him? Let Obama take him on. 9:53. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. And here's the thing. Donald Trump doesn't have anything against those people. Trump is a live and let live type of guy. And they're still angry. Well, Trump has given hints that he'll put Supreme Court justices in as well, who will look out for the sanctity of the unborn, their lives while they're in mommy's womb. And I guess if you're from that perspective, babies come from normal sexual relations, and I guess they think we can't have that. In their view, they're just going to take over the earth, and then we'll just birth babies in test tubes, right? I guess. I don't know what their thinking is, what the mindset happens to be. Speaking of Black Lives Matter, Ron Martinelli, Dr. Ron Martinelli, this guy's got quite a background. He's writing for a publication called The Hill today. I don't know how this happened. They must have left the door open because a conservative got through the door at The Hill. Black Lives Matter lies force cops from policing to self-protection. He started his career as a police officer 41 years ago, worked many, many years. And he said at the time, we were just coming out of Vietnam era. There had been riots. We had been dealing with the Black Panthers, the Black Liberation Army, and the Weather Underground, but they were starting to fade away. Police work back then was refreshingly simple. There were good people and the bad guys. The basic job of policing was to be the thin blue line that formed a protective barrier between the two groups. Civil rights lawsuits, criminal prosecutions, and protests resulting from allegations of excessive force were few and far between. The paradigm of police work will now change from community policing to self-protection. So the left is on the march in this country. First of all, they've knocked down our social mores and all of the old things that used to hold us together communal-wise. The fact that we had certain standards that we kept, those are gone. They've knocked those down. Now they're trying to knock down other institutions, your churches. They're trying to knock down policing. They're trying to knock down the military. Why? Well, because they feel when they get rid of all of this, then they can go out and create their utopian liberal paradise and give you free stuff because they can raise taxes and then give you free stuff. Once they've actually, gutted all of the wealthy in this country, after 6 months they won't have any money left, but hey. The fourth estate, and that's the media, he says, continues to do a horrible job at informing the American public about the forensic facts of deadly officer encounters with suspects, especially those in the minority community. The media misunderstood and falsely portrayed the actual factual circumstances of high-profile death cases such as Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, Freddie Gray in Baltimore, Maryland, and most recently, Anton Sterling in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The fourth officer accused in the Gray case just got acquitted. We should point that out. Once again, jurors or judges hear these cases. In this case, I think it was just the judge. The judge says, there's no there there. The writer goes on to say, police officers are not stupid. They are not out there to become targets for cowardly snipers, active shooters, and agitated, chaotic, ticking time bomb lone wolf assassins. They will protect themselves at all costs. I think that the liberals have to realize that we're dealing with people out there who know how to use firearms. And right now, you've got a handful of these killers who've got some training in the military who are going out and gunning down police officers. But most of the thugs out there don't have that sort of training, and that's why they end up killing 3-year-olds with all of their stray fire. They're not going to last long when it hits the fan, folks. It's not going to happen. And the police are going to be backed up by a lot of guys who go squirrel hunting, and those guys know how to use those firearms too. It's funny how that has worked out in this country. And one last note. We've got to wrap up here in just a few seconds about all of this. Way back in the middle of the last decade, my buddy Scott McConnell was serving in the Army at the time, and he told me, he said, when I got in the 90s, it was a bunch of guys like me from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who wanted to go fight bad guys, and we loved this country. By the time we got to about 2005, it was all gangbangers from around the country who were now serving in the military because they changed some standards. And a lot of those guys got involved because they wanted to learn military tactics so they could take them back and share them with their gangs. This comes from a witness inside the U.S. Army. Well, what Scott told me about, if that was the case, is now coming to fruition today on the streets of Dallas and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Bill Colley saying, God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll be back here tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll have more convention updates as well. In the meantime, Rush Limbaugh will follow news at 10 o'clock this morning from Fox. Have a great day.